today with Anna Bernagozzi on my left and Asheen Phansey on my right to discuss about empowering the workforce of the future. Indeed, we are here in Milano at the Design Week, and one of the topics that we wanted to discuss with you was what kind of action we can take to empower the workforce of the future, what are the key skills that we want to empower people on. And in order to discuss that, I am very happy to be with our two panel speakers, who have a very much different background and skills. So I think it will be a very interesting session, because indeed, Anna Bernagozzi, you are Director of Design Theory and History at École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs de Paris. Did I say it right?
Yes.
And Anna, we will ask you a bit of a challenge today because you are Italian, so you're in your home country, yet you're based in Paris, and you speak, obviously, French as your primary language now, but we'll ask you to speak in English in your home country.
Super challenge.
And Asheen, you are Director of Sustainability at Babson College. You bring a very rich background, both in the industry as a consultant for sustainability, and now joining the academics to launch the sustainability program of Babson College in Boston, which is an entrepreneur school. You are Native American, well, you speak English as being based in the US, but you speak a little bit of French as well, but today it's going to be more comfortable for you as we speak in English. Okay.
I have the easy job.
So I'd like to introduce this session, even though we will talk about workforce of the future, which is indeed what are the critical skills that we believe we are lacking in order to build a more sustainable future. And working here with our two academics, I'd like to start by a question which is more a consumer perspective. And indeed, what do you believe is the best sustainable experience that you have had lately as a consumer? Anna, can you tell me about it?
I think the big revolution was when supermarkets some years ago decided to stop selling products with their plastic bags and to shift to renewable plastic bags. And I wanted to cite this specific case because, of course, it has changed the way we approach our shopping, so to say, and the way in which we have to organize ourselves, and having always this baseline of sustainability in everyday action that we do. And I wanted to highlight another thing, that these plastic bags, this bioplastic, it's called Matter B, which is I'm Italian, I'm teaching in France, but Matter B is an Italian product produced in Sardinia, and it's bioplastic by Novamont, this Italian company. So I would like to know what innovation is also for an Italian company. It was launched 25 years ago, and it's composed by starch, cellulose, vegetable oils. And what is also very important, there is not only this fabulous bioplastic, but there is also the project of a company in a specific context, and the will of this company to create a new economic model and to foster regional regeneration through this project. So a more sustainable and social innovation project.
So indeed, this is your perspective as a consumer, but we can already see that you are an expert, because indeed for us as consumer, we see how it changed our shopping experience, but you already see what is behind it in terms of new materials that we can invent in order to go for a more sustainable world. What about you, Asheen? What was one of the latest sustainable experience that you had?
So I strongly believe in the power of the circular economy to really change how we interact with the world. And so the example that is one of my favorites lately is from HP. It's called Instant Ink. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. So at its core, the technology is simply a Wi-Fi enabled print cartridge. So it prints, it captures the information about the printing, and when it's low on ink, it kind of sends a signal to HP and says, send a new ink cartridge. They'll mail one in a box, you put the old one back in the box and send it back. That's the technological side. But what's fascinating to me is circular economy requires technological innovation as well as business model innovation, entrepreneurial innovation. And so what HP has done is not just you put a Wi-Fi connection on this cartridge that's kind of straightforward and simple. They've actually redesigned the business model around it. So instead of paying for the ink that you use or the new cartridge, you pay for the number of pages that it prints. So you have a subscription service, so you print 1,000 pages a month, 5,000, whatever it is, and when it runs out of ink, they send you a new one for free. You continue to pay the subscription for the actual pages. And so what it does is it aligns, from an environmental perspective, the incentive for HP is to make that ink last as long as possible so they can use less ink to print more pages. And for you, of course, and for the environment, that's also what we are trying to do. The last thing about that is, let's not forget that sustainability is about the financial success, it's about the environmental success, but it's also about the social ecosystem. And so if you think about ink cartridges, at least in the US, one of the ways that typically ink cartridges are recycled is a consumer will bring it back to a retail store. They'll bring it back to one of the superstores for office products, and those stores love to take for free the ink cartridges and recycle them because they know if they can get you in, you're going to remember, oh, I need some pens and some paper, and I ran out of staples, and I'm gonna go buy things. Well, if you sign up to the subscription service, you no longer need that middleman, right? And so HP has realized this. They don't want to cut out this part of the ecosystem out of the loop because then they would simply incentivize them to push more, selling more ink, which is not what the world needs. And so what they've done is they've given them a percentage of this subscription service to say, if you sell the subscription service, we'll also share the revenue with you. And so it brings the whole ecosystem together, united around this common goal of reducing ink, reducing the amount of plastic and chemical usage from this product. And so the technology enabled that of a chip in there that is Wi-Fi enabled and communicates with a central server, but the business model is what shifted to enable the change in human behavior, and that's what fascinates me.
Thank you. And indeed, I like to ask this question. Always what we see is that as already a statement, sustainable innovation is about designing new materials, bioplastic, and it's about also business model. And so is it what we need to taught the new generation and the workforce of the future on? New business model, design on new materials? This is what we will discuss further. So Asheen, from your perspective as a professor, an adjunct professor, and also the director of sustainability in Babson College, so it's an entrepreneur school. So you are building the next generation of entrepreneurs. You will talk to us a lot about indeed business model today. Can you highlight some of the work that you do with Babson College?
Should we play the video now?
Yeah.
Let's, if we can play the video.
In 1919, Roger Babson's students took a pledge to embark on a business career as a means of rendering service to humanity. Babson College would be a new business school based on the beliefs that people are the greatest resource and a global business community offers opportunities for peace and prosperity. From this pioneering vision, Babson was the first to believe that entrepreneurs are made, not born, creating entrepreneurship as an academic discipline that equips students with an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set. We have redefined entrepreneurship to mean more than just starting a business. Our innovative curricula, practical teaching, and research has made us the recognized #1 school for entrepreneurship for an unprecedented 25 consecutive years. What Roger Babson launched 100 years ago has never been more needed or more relevant. Our purpose is now, as it was then, to harness the power of business to generate positive economic and social change around the world. The mission for Babson's next century is to bring the entrepreneurial thinking shaped by our acclaimed, dedicated professors to more people and places. Babson has long been a global community with a global focus. We will continue to bring Babson everywhere so that entrepreneurial thinking can create impact everywhere. Now more than ever, the world needs what Babson is. Because today, more than ever, service to humanity is everyone's business.
So what we can see from this video is that not only you are creating entrepreneurs, but you are creating entrepreneurs for social good. Can we say that?
Absolutely. I think, Valerie, when you talk about skills for the future workforce, what we believe is that we have, in the past 100 years, been teaching specific trade skills, financial modeling and accounting systems, operations management. And what we're realizing more and more is that those skills become obsolete just as quickly as we can teach them, and we can learn the new ones from the faculty side to teach the students. So rather than teach these kind of trade skills, what we're shifting towards is teaching the fundamental ethic of entrepreneurship. And that ethic is to go and create with limited resources, to understand the context in which you're creating, and to take those limited resources and create something that hasn't been seen. And the idea behind that is if we can teach students to go out and try things, to fail quickly and move on, learn and move on, that action, or what we call entrepreneurial thought and action, is just that. It's thinking about something and then acting, learning and going back and thinking about and iterating through that process. So for example, in the freshman year, which is the first year for our undergraduate students, they're required to actually start a business, to produce an actual product, to sell it in the community, to their friends, to the surrounding community, to then cash out, close down the business, all in the first year. So they actually get to try and do it. They take an idea and take it through the entrepreneurial process. And as we go through, we integrate the idea of sustainability into it by saying, how can you think about how what you're doing affects the people around you, the environment around you, and all of the stakeholders, not just shareholders, but stakeholders. And so, I believe, and Babson believes, that the future, the workforce of the future will be empowered to go out and have jobs and create jobs that we don't know when we teach them. Because the world is moving faster and it needs that core skill of understanding the environment and going out and just trying things.
Concretely, do you have specific curricula in Babson where you are teaching about sustainability, or is it embedded into the programs?
It's both. So, I teach a course called Entrepreneurship and Innovation Inspired by Nature, which is based on the design ethic of biomimicry, or nature-inspired design. I'm sure you know a lot about it, Anna.
I've done a workshop on that too.
Excellent.
In design side.
And so that's one example. We have financing and valuing sustainability. We have courses in the operational side of sustainability. But these are the electives where students can do deep dives. What's more fundamental is integrating the idea of social enterprise, social change, social inequality, and then ecological systems, and understanding ecological and ecosystem effects into the core classes. So it really is both.
Okay, so indeed what we see is that sustainability is a purpose, but it's also an expertise that we need to teach students, whether it is biomaterials, whether it is circular economy, whether it is carbon footprint assessment, and that indeed it needs to be everywhere, but it needs also to be in specific curricula in order to grow expertise on the topic. And Anna, when we prepared the session, indeed you said for design, sustainability has been embedded into the design school for decades already, and it's part of everything that we do and that you do. So can you highlight some of the projects that you do as part of your work?
Yes, it's very interesting that we come from two schools who have a curriculum which is so different. I suppose you are a private university. I'm in a kind of very old, founded in 1785 school based in Paris, where there are many artistic, l'École Nationale Supérieure, artistic, more artistic, so to say, background, if you have a look at it. And if we can go back to the radical Italians, where we are in Italy, we are where the radical Italians were. We used to talk about the hot design and the cold design. The cold design is the part of the engineering one, and the hot design is part of the more artistic or oriented design. But we see that this cold and hot probably today doesn't exist anymore. We are kind of a middle. We have understood that we have to work more and more together. So in our curriculum, we need to work more and more with business school. We are, for example, yes.
You are in control of the machine.
Sorry. We are part of PSL at the ENSAD. PSL is Paris Sciences Lettres, which is a kind of consortium, a campus of, so to say, the best public schools, university in France. In part of PSL, there are universities we work with, like Paris Dauphine for business, with whom we develop many projects together to really try to understand which is our society. How do we have to rethink about our society, which is our responsibility as designers. So the student have to think, and the other one has to think what designers are doing right now. They're just, at the end of a process. That's not a new story, but the designers help having a different viewpoint, and they become kind of expert of the context, which is fundamental also in art and design schools. So as being part of PSL, we work, for example, with Dauphine, which is one of the best business schools, and we work also with Le Mines, which is one of the engineering schools. And
what are the key concepts that you are pushing to your students?
Yeah. I think that nowadays the students have to understand that we are moving from a world who we thought having unlimited resources to a world where the resources are limited. And in this framework, they have a huge responsibility because time, as we know, is running fast. And so we have to accelerate good practices, good social practices to invent new economic models together with business schools, together with engineering schools, and to solve a problem, a mainly cultural problem. I didn't say that our university, which is a kind of French speciality, depends from the Ministry of Culture, which is kind of very different from other countries. I think it's a French specificity. And so there is a very important cultural element for me that hasn't been thought about too much or reflected about too much, is that Descartes, which is this well-known French philosopher, put always this dichotomy between nature, for example, and culture. Nowadays, this dichotomy doesn't exist anymore. Nature and culture are the same thing, and we need to be, and students need to know of being part of the same processes. And this opposition, which is part of our culture, brings an abstraction to the action we do to the world every day. So we don't need to deepen this fraction between the perception of nature, as it will need to be explored today because of the limits I said you before. And we need to be capable of acting, as you said, on this world. But for acting on this world, we need to know that we have a responsibility. And how do we train students to have responsibility? By working and co-designing with communities, with citizens, in very different scales, projects that helps to forge what we hope a better world. I mean, it's a big project, huh?
It is a big project for a great ambition, which is obviously a no plan B, as we were saying. So we hear a lot about collaboration, indeed. You talked about the collaboration between design and business school, between design, obviously we cannot not talk about it as Dassault Systèmes, between design, engineering and design school. What are some key projects of collaboration that you can highlight from your work, Asheen?
So Babson, as you hopefully have learned, is an entrepreneurship school. For those of you who haven't heard of Babson, now you have, and I've done my job of awareness. But we cannot change the world with business alone. And so what we've done at Babson is we've collaborated with a neighboring school called the Olin College of Engineering, and with another college in the same town called Wellesley College, which you may know as Hillary Clinton's alma mater. I think that's what everyone seems to know of it as. But so we have for example, we have a sustainability certificate that students can earn in which they have to take 5 classes, but the requirement is that at least 1 class has to be taken in each of those 3 universities. So they will take a business class at Babson, they'll take an engineering class at Olin, and they'll take a policy class, policy, law, or humanities related to sustainability at Wellesley College. And the idea is that not only do they learn how to look at this from the challenge of sustainability through different lenses, they also interrelate with students that have a different background, a different perspective, and a different experience. And so in those collaborations and those conversations, they learn new perspectives of looking at a problem. The engineering students will learn the perspectives of business students and humanities students, and all of these, and in many cases the groups will kind of mix together. So one example of a product or company that's come out of this sort of collaboration is a company called Big Belly Solar. So you may have seen these products without realizing it. It's a solar-powered trash compactor. So if you look, it's in nearly every major city in the U.S. and many cities in Europe. It's very simple. It's a trash can essentially with a compactor, and the idea is that when it fills up, the solar panel powers the compaction, and then only when it's full and cannot compact anymore does it signal the truck to come pick it up. Because it turns out that most of the cost and most of the energy of waste management goes into the diesel that is powering the trucks to come pick it up. So if a truck is making its rounds and picking up half-empty containers, it's obviously wasting a lot of energy and a lot of cost. And so the way this came about was one of the Babson MBA students wandered over to Olin College and said, "Hey, what are you guys working on? Anything interesting?" And they showed him some prototypes. He took it first to ski resorts and used this at ski resorts, and then took it to municipalities and said, "We can significantly cut down on your waste management costs." And now, 10, 15 years later, it's in nearly every major city, and he's cashed out and moved on to a new startup. And so the idea being, it is the technological and the entrepreneurship and the policy that have to blend together to come up with really novel solutions to change our world.
So here the example that you take indeed is I would say an opportunistic example of one student that were in contact with such project. What is your view on how we can systematically foster collaboration projects between different design school, entrepreneur school, and engineering school?
There's an old joke.
And you don't have to say the Dassault Systèmes platform, obviously.
Well, I wasn't going to, but now that you mention it. There's an old joke that I'm a chemical engineer by background, so there's an old joke. How do you tell an extrovert engineer looks at your shoes when he talks? And so the idea is it's really hard to force us to get out of our frame, our context. And so I think the systematization is simply to create opportunities, whether it's physical opportunities by blending classes together, whether it's virtual opportunities by using platforms, for example, where students can collaborate. The idea is to just get people into a physical or virtual space and let them create, let them talk to each other, let them learn from each other, and understand kind of a more holistic approach to the problem. And that gets to the heart of systems thinking and systems challenges.
Yeah, that's a fantastic transition actually to what you have been achieving with your student as well, fostering this multidisciplinarity, this provocative thinking to drive very innovative project with your students. Can you highlight some example for us?
Yes. For example, we are working always with the concepts, for example, like resilience, that you probably know. And we have done an exhibition here in Milan in 2015 already, highlighting the necessity from designers to reinvent new tools and processes for resilience. That is, to enable designers to produce to produce this kind of new action, to be capable of analytically analyzing a context, and that's something that it sounds easy, but it's really not easy. So, of course, in our curriculum, we works with anthropology, ethnographers, sociologists. Human sciences are really very important in the approach of new designers, designers of tomorrow. They need to be capable of adapting themselves to new and to understanding this new context, and to be flexible. Flexibility is also one of the most important features designers need to develop together with businessmen, together with engineers, together with other forces in a very transdisciplinary approach. That's what I showed here with some graduating projects from ENSAD. And I want to show you now what some of these have become, because it was 2018. This is a funny image of the exhibition we did here in Milan. And the people you see on the photos, for example, the lady on the left, his part of this project that was called Zephyr, and now it's called, sorry, it's not this one, it's this one, sorry, no problem. Anyway, I will tell you.
It's this one.
Yes, this one, yes. It's called UNF Design. It's an air platform, autonomous in energy. It's so, if you are more engineer than designers, it has to say, oh, okay, designers are doing this too, that's interesting. But this is a project that was co-developed by two former designers my school. It started in my university. And then they work of course, with some engineers and some business schools. That's the good equation for the future. This project has won plenty of prizes already being in the school, and once they are out, they got out of the school, they won the pre-challenge UMATech, the prize of innovation of humanitarian, sharing energy in the cities, which is a part of the prizes of Dassault Systèmes and EDF, enterprise prize, and the trophy of the engineer of the future, done by two designers. Isn't that interesting for you? So this is one of the cases I wanted to share with you. And actually, this platform, it was born to bring energy to places where it was not possible before. But actually, nowadays, they're shifting more in collecting data and using this data for example, wildlife monitoring and NGOs, etc. So they shifted a little bit the activity that they are doing with this platform. By the way, UNF are doing the second fundraising, so if you want to help them, you're kindly invited. And there is just another one, if I have time.
Sure, of course.
And there is another project which is more product, and you say, okay, that's more design. We are here in Milan, you saw plenty of project, etc. There are other two designers from ENSAD that developed this company where they use waste from industrial wastes that have no commercial values, and with this commercial waste they do furniture. The good story is that they really developed a special economic model and system with a former student of an economics school and one engineer, always the same formula.
So we have a dream team, a designer, an engineer, and a business guy, right?
To develop
Or business gal.
this company, who has already won plenty of prizes, because I don't know why the engineer didn't came to this idea of reusing in the way they thought of reusing this waste material from industries, and they developed it together. And nowadays they are shifting it from the scale of furniture to the scale of architecture. And BNP, which is a very famous bank, is inviting and helping them in developing their architectural branch. So, and they just came out 2 years ago from the school. So.
Fantastic project. And I think obviously if you go around in the Milan Design Week, we just had a tour this morning, and I think there will be others organized tomorrow morning by Dassault Systèmes, the trend tour, as we call it. You'll see a lot of those concepts done by young designers, students, that are really putting sustainable innovation at the heart of what they do. And I have seen one quite interesting project about French fries wrapping. And the wrap was made out of the potato skin. So they recycle, they transform, not recycle, they transform the potato skin in order to make the wrap for the French fries. We have seen also a soap dispenser, whereas the dispenser, instead of being in plastic, is in soap. So I think whenever I am in such event, we cannot not be optimistic about indeed the workforce of the future being already empowered on sustainability concept. However, and this go back to my previous question as consumer, how much do we buy really on sustainability? You know, we know how much we eat on bio or organic food, but how much do we buy really for sustainability? And so I think from those concepts, this is probably always an interrogation, a questioning for me is, we see a lot of innovation, we see a lot of concept, but how do we move from those concepts to industrialization, to massification, so that it does not have to be a choice to buy sustainable, but that it's a given somehow that the offering is sustainable or none. And how do you think that we can accelerate on that? Is it political action? Is it more market innovation? What are your perspective on that, Asheen?
I think yes is the answer. It's innovation, it's political action, it's whatever drives human behavior. There's a wonderful story from an office products company called Staples in the US. Their head of sustainability was a longtime mentor of mine, and he told me this story about trying to get more recycled paper fiber into their generic copy paper. It's the store brand copy paper that many people buy. And so what they did initially was they had a totally virgin version of it, Staples brand copy paper, and then they had a version that was 10% post-consumer recycled content, and then one it was 30%. And the prices, as you can imagine, because the recycled fiber was more expensive, the prices were the cheapest was the virgin, then the 10% was a little bit more expensive, and then the 30% was considerably more expensive. And so think about human nature. What people would do is they would come in, they would say, I can do better than the virgin, but I can't afford the 30%. I'll buy the 10%. And that was the largest seller. Eventually, because they were buying a lot of that 10% recycled fiber, they got the volume up where they could go back to their supplier and say, hey, we're buying a lot of your recycled fiber. Would you lower the price for us? And eventually, they got the price lowered to parity with the virgin fiber, and they just simply pulled the virgin off the shelf and only sold the 10%. But they took that 10% tag off it, and they just said, this is our generic paper. If you look at the back in the fine print, you'll see it's 10% post-consumer recycled. So they had a 10%, and they had a 30%, and then they introduced a 50%. And you can imagine what happened. People bought the 30% because it was in the middle, it was the balance, right? Now, if you go into the store, there's a generic one, which is actually 30%, and then there's 100%. And so this is because they were driving the behavior through human behavior to get that economy of scale up. So they worked with both the economic system, the technological system, and the human behavioral perception, marketing, to drive the behavior towards what they wanted. So that's an example of pure innovation. If you look at an example of, in the more policy realm, something I've been working a lot on is carbon pricing. You know, we have an emissions trading scheme here in the EU, in the US. You might imagine we're not really moving on the federal level. But on the state level, there are many states that are working on business-friendly ways of pricing carbon. And so the idea is, if we can price the externality of carbon into the cost of doing business, then we can let companies innovate around how to create new products and new business models that minimize the carbon emitted through the process. So that's one of the regulatory examples.
Indeed, this was fun because once, while we were preparing the session and we were asking ourselves what could accelerate more sustainable innovations, and Asheen, coming from the US, indeed was talking about more political pressure, and us coming from EU, where we already have a lot of regulation and political pressure, we're like, no, we need more innovation. We need even so.
The grass is
yes,
always greener.
From a US perspective, you want more regulation and more political involvement for sustainability. Anna, what do you believe we should do in order to accelerate and to drive more consciousness and on sustainable innovation?
I have two answers,
Yes.
which are not contradictory but complementary. So the first one goes in the same direction. I completely agree with you. But what kind of regulation? Probably we're not talking about exactly the same kind of regulation. I'm talking about more bottom-up activities. There are existing all over. There are wonderful, already existing systems that can be deployed at another level. And to deploy this, we need other law regulation, other business regulations, and we don't have it. So to foster and to help this bottom-up already existing activities, we really need to have another kind of regulation of the already existing law and commercial entities. But the important thing for me as an educator is to help the students to pose the right question. So
You know what is the motto of Dassault Systèmes? If we ask the right question, we can change the world.
exactly.
And this is what you do. You ask the right
Exactly.
question.
So we try to help them, but nobody knows what is right. I don't want to be the one who helps you. Okay, this is the way you pose the right question. But what I'm convinced about, and you will have the chance, I do a little bit of advertising tonight at the Pavillon Français here in Milan. I'm the curator of an exhibition of project coming from my school, so if you want to come and have a look and sharing some ideas more deeply than what we can do it today.
You are authorized to leave the area only to go to this exhibition and come back.
But it's late. I mean, you can come at 8 o'clock. You can come later in the night. And so with this exhibition, I try to show what are the exchanges and what are the important questions the designers have to be capable of posing by fostering their cooperation with the scientific world, with the technical world, but of course with our background, especially in France, which is our intellectual world. So if you go and have a look also at the exhibition by Paolo Antonelli, you will see the French pavilion where there are plenty of materials to read. I think that reading and writing, that's what I didn't say. I'm nowadays also about to launch a book written by my BA students about how they forge their world. It's very important to have a vision of the world, to write it down. When you write it down with your hands and you put it on a white paper, sometimes you see that the question is not very well articulated, and you need to change probably some receipts to some ingredients of your receipt to get to the right receipt. So the importance of writing and posing the right question for me is fundamental. So with this exhibition, I've posed 5 questions. The first one is we need to understand the objectives of daily algorithm to demystify them. So this is a very interesting project developed by a student. It's a graduation project. And now he's working at MIT with Paolo Ratti, with Sensitivity Lab. So you will understand this by talking to him, the scale of this understanding of algorithm beyond this pedagogical tool that he developed for coming out of the school. This is a research program done by a PhD student of my school, where the question is, we need to question the value of everyday objects and the individual relation to the matter. And here, for example, he has developed this machine capable of imitating the purling. So it's also like a little bit biomimicry, but not exactly. That's really reproducing the way the mother pearl delivers the pearl. So artificially reproducing the system, but it's completely biological and it's completely sustainable. But the question is not to launch another thing on the market. Attention. Here the designer poses a question. And then it's the businessman who goes, okay, I would be interested to do that. But the intention of the PhD student is to say, does it make sense? Do we have to do it, even if it's sustainable, even if it's bioengineered, even if... Okay, I don't discuss it further. This is another thesis I director, is the capacity and the necessity, I think, to marvel and to at the faculties of animals and assume our animality. Always to go back to Descartes, animals were treated as opposite to us, and actually we are also part of it. And so it questions a lot of ethical and ethical questions. So I can't go thorough. This is another one who needs, who I foster the students to go and question the objects, and these are, for example, objects that they can't be today read by artificial intelligence. So who has to do object in the future? Are artificial intelligence those in the future who will be capable of doing object? Do they need to do objects, or is still man who still will have the power to create crafts and objects? But there are books getting out of all this project. I don't have the time to develop this one because it's quite, but I invite you to come tonight and to take some time to slow a little bit down and have the chance to read a little bit of the books that accompany all these reflections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. So I think indeed as a conclusion, and I'll let you obviously have a word of conclusion, even though we are approaching the end of the session. What we can see is we have two academics with us today, one from a design school, one from an entrepreneur school. Sustainability is indeed a purpose, but it's also an expertise. It's a science that is being taught for a long time in design, for probably a little less longer in entrepreneur school. What we see also, and I like to have this as a key takeaways that you said, Asheen, is we need to create a physical space and digital space for collaboration between those disciplines. Because what we see is indeed the workforce of the future, your students, they are empowered through your institution. Every one of them indeed having put sustainability as a focus either in their curricula or in the way they question the world or the way they think. But how we create more collaboration through physical places and virtual places, indeed, for those disciplines to really come together to come with the best model. As you said, do we even need to have an object? Or what is the best business case rather than the best design innovation? So Asheen, you want to have a word of conclusion? We need to wrap up, so very quickly.
Yeah, I would just charge everyone to really think about the world around us from the context of what we call entrepreneurial thought and action. Go out and create change, and from that learn, because you can be assured that the students that are graduating now, that are creating the workforce of the future, they're not going to want to sit and think about things and put in their time and explore and learn. They're going to want to go out and do and break things and fail and tear things down and rebuild them. And so I invite you all to embrace that ethic as well.
Anna?
I repeat what I already said, but for me the most important thing is really to think, pose the right question our daily actions, our daily needs, our daily desires, our daily wills, and then we will be capable together with many different approaches, with the richness, I would say, of our different approaches to co-create a better future.
Thank you very much. And from my own perspective, indeed, and from Dassault Systèmes, what we want to create is more collaboration spaces, more opportunity to create together. And I will launch a quick video in order for you to be aware of a program that we will be launching very soon around a sustainable challenge. Please launch the video. So indeed, stay tuned, because empowering the workforce of the future, first and foremost, means having people being convinced that they can change things. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, Asheen. And let's keep on the good work.